Did everyone get a chance to watch episode 2 this week?
Yep.
Again, or just for the first time?
Again.
Did watching it a second time help?
Oh,
Yeah. There's
I thought
kind of
really
context.
Like I
I
said,
got your same short too, and I wish I would have won mine tonight.
like I
Well,
said,
Won the Colts.
the deeper you go in and then go back and watch, the more sense the whole thing makes.
I agree.
Yeah.
I thought it ended abruptly. I'm going,
Well, I
I
think
want more.
so.
To be
So
continued.
yeah. So
Yeah.
listening to Dallas's commentary on why they left this episode the way that they did, and for those of you that haven't seen it, the whole idea is based around Shabbat, the day of rest, Sunday. And so Peter is struggling with some of his financials, and it leads off with him breaking that rule and then also collaborating with the Romans, which two things that would have been huge no-nos. And so in episode 1, we get this wonderful ending that's just heartwarming, and where we get to see Jesus, we get to see Mary made whole and redeemed, right? And so instead of trying to make this series all end with feel-good stories, Dallas wanted to make sure that in episode 2 right away, he showed that followers of God, followers of Jesus are going to go through hard times too. And so it gives us Peter in this moment of just intense struggle. And so we have a heartwarming story, and we have one of pain and quite honestly betrayal, because our life isn't always going to be easy. And so that was one of the reasons that we get that cliffhanger ending, because sometimes we just don't know, and sometimes life is hard. To point out, I have the Zoom link going. Nobody has joined us today, but there have been some people that have said that they would like to have the option of coming back and maybe seeing and listening to our discussion later. So the link will record both video and audio. Is there anyone that has an innate need to be seen on video? Did special hair and makeup?
No.
You went to Mary to have your hair done?
That's the law looking for.
So I think in that case, just to make things easy, we'll probably just post the audio so that you can feel maybe a little bit more comfortable sharing and not. So as long as you trust me to not put the video out anymore. Hopefully everyone is still comfortable. We've had some really nice discussions the last 2 weeks. I don't want that to be limited by. Well, if we'd open up to page 43, would anyone like to read the part of Jesus? We'll go through well, it's actually the ending dialogue, right? I have a volunteer for Jesus.
I know how to read.
All right. And anyone for Mary?
I will.
Are we ready?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Hello, Mary.
Hello.
It's good to see you.
Yes.
I don't want to be rude, but would it be okay if
Oh, yes, of course. Please come in. I just never thought you'd, I have guests here. This is my first time. I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, James and Dennis, Rabbi.
You already know these men?
they are students of mine? I trust they have been polite.
Of course.
Oh, I'll be sure. Your guest can take the seat. Yes, Mary?
Oh, of course. Yes, of course. Please have a seat. I keep saying of course a lot. Friends, this is the man I told you about who helped me.
Oh, yes, Mary has told us so much about you.
I hope not too much.
I'm Barnaby. This is Shula. She's blind.
Ah,
In case you couldn't tell.
I'm sorry, I don't actually know your name.
I'm Jesus of Nazareth.
Well, apparently something good can come from Nazareth.
Mary, I'm honored to be here. Why don't you begin?
Oh, no, I couldn't. Now that you're here, you must.
thank you, but this is your home, and I would love for you to do it.
Okay, I'll just read this from this now. Now, the heavens and the earth were completed and all their hosts, and God completed on the seventh day his work, what he did. And God abstained on the seventh day from all his work he did. And God blessed the seventh day, and he hallowed it. But thereon he abstained from all the work that God created to do.
Does anyone remember the part of that conversation that got cut out? It was actually Barnaby, right? Barnaby offered to read for Mary,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Because
she
there's
said
the
she
cheap
would find
version.
it.
and Mary said, "No, my father taught me how to read."
Yeah.
Yes.
And you saw the surprise in his face, right? Like, oh, that's not normal, especially with where she was from a poor fishing village. That's not something that a normal daughter would have been taught there. It's not a skill that would have been highly valued by a husband. So the fact that her father had invested that kind of time and effort into her shows their relationship, and I think speaks to why she was so hurt and so lost when he was gone.
Mhm.
So I know we talked about that a little bit with how valued she was, even as a young daughter. But this is one of those times where I think the writers are trying to clue us in that women were severely undervalued in that culture, and perhaps we need to reevaluate their position within culture today as well. So Shabbat, typically we equate sleep with rest. While our eyes are open, we go 100 miles an hour, often measuring the value of our days by how much we can accomplish. Good days are busy ones, full of going, seeing, doing, exploring, conquering, and completing. And then at night, we're no longer physically capable of doing all the things, and so we stop for a moment to quote unquote rest. So in here we see kind of the hustle and bustle of life, right? And then it comes to his head. So in the beginning of the episode, we go back, 970 some years? Right? I think it's 948 BC that it shows the Shabbat dinner, the Sunday dinner, the Sabbath dinner. Well, Saturday dinner, it's Friday night. It starts at sundown. And we see the boy point to the star, right? So what is the beginning of the Sabbath?
Friday evening was the sun was
Specifically when you can see the first star. Did anyone like equate that with another biblical story?
there. Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
Has anyone watched the pilot?
Yes.
Are you talking about the pilot of the chosen?
Yes, yep.
No. Yes.
And the first,
Oh, yeah.
right? And what signals the birth of Jesus,
The star.
right? For most people it was the star. The shepherds luckily got the angel, which that's pretty incredible in and of itself, the way that they depict that. Like it's just light dancing everywhere. These guys out in the middle of the field are just like, ah! But what does Jesus signal for us? The arrival of Jesus signals something for our lives, and it's that we're no longer under the law. And trying to keep those laws was exhausting. Right? It was a constant battle of trying to remember all the things that you can do and all the things that you can't do. And so the coming of Jesus, that star, signals rest for us, a freedom from having to maintain that hustle and bustle of life. And so the fact that the star, the sight of the first star signals the beginning of the Sabbath, I don't think it's coincidence that there was a star that signaled a little bit of rest for us now that we are no longer under the law. So it says from Exodus 20, verse 8, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor to do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And on it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant, your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So it says the Sabbath day was and is the day of communal observance that God's people do together, primarily marked by the abstinence from work. Well, that's not all it's about. Having a day off each week is a perk for sure, and God built it into his system because he's gracious to his creation and intimately in tune with our needs. When you think about the Sabbath, why do we have it? Like that. Because we talked about how we're each made with a hole in ourselves, right? We were made incomplete. And so without communing with God, that hole is never going to be filled. But is once a week enough? Right? So if it was only about worshiping God, then theoretically once a week would be enough. So why then do we have this Sabbath, this holy day of rest?
Well, they commune, the family friend commune together too.
So we're talking fellowship now, which is an innate part of church, like that we need each other, both for strength and sustenance, not that we can kind of go about our own Christian walk alone. I agree. Anyone else have something that they think about when they think about the Sabbath day?
That it takes the busyness and distractions away from us so that we can focus.
Yeah. I agree. Others?
Recharge.
Is it because God needed that recharge on the seventh day?
I worked hard.
Did he need the rest?
No. He did it for us. We didn't do it.
Right? So I am, right? Which is a poor definition because it's I was, I am, and always will be. God is consistent and he didn't get tired, right? Like, putting all this together, it's a lot of work and it blows our minds, but God wasn't tired. He didn't need a nap to recharge and power up. But when God sent Jesus to be our example for life, it didn't start with Jesus. Right? It started on that seventh day when God said, I'm going to rest as an example for you. It's the quote, man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. Right? We weren't made so that we could observe the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made so that we could observe it for our benefit. And like you said, taking that whole day off and being able to just take a full day to worship God, is there a better recharge? Not that I can think of. Spend the whole week running around trying to fill that hole, sometimes with things that aren't God. It's nice to be able to stop and reevaluate all those priorities and say, no, this is for God. I've been trying to do things the wrong way. Try better next week. So we need a day off to hit the reset button, to attend church, to spend time with the people we love. Which, did you notice what the mom described? What was the purpose of the Sabbath at the beginning when her son was asking? The purpose of the Sabbath was for
Your family and friends and God.
did she get the order right? Right? She's right. The tradition is right. And what they were observing was right. We can do the right thing for the wrong reasons. and we can do the wrong thing for the right reasons. And then there's Peter who's doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. So we kind of span that gamut with Mary's kind of doing this Shabbat, right? Not knowing what she's doing. She's doing the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. We see Nicodemus and his Shabbat dinner, and they're doing the right thing, but most of the people that are attending there aren't there for the right reasons.
Right.
And then we see Peter off doing his own thing, wrong thing for the wrong reasons. So we span the entire gamut in terms of our character development here, of seeing people either observing it or not. So I think we can kind of place ourselves in those situations.
And then we
Based on,
saw Matthew that was by himself.
Oh,
Wasn't that
oh.
heartbreaking? To me, that was heartbreaking.
was he by himself?
Well, then we had his dog.
But he was looking more than you.
Yeah, he wanted
Of his
to go in
family,
with
right?
his family, yeah.
Which, do you think they would have let him in?
No,
He was on the show.
Right?
yeah, he would not have been welcome.
Which Matthew having Sabbath dinner in the dirt with the dog. Another Bible story? Anyone have a parallel for that?
Prodigal son.
Also,
Well, when he gets hungry, he goes and tries to eat the slop of the pig spit,
interesting.
you know?
Yeah. Well, I think Matthew
And
probably
he
brought
doesn't think
some.
he doesn't think he's welcome at home.
Well, so in that prodigal son, it talks about like he longs to fill his stomach with the pods that pigs are eating, but nobody gives him anything. So it doesn't say that he takes anything there, right?
That's true.
Which we have to wonder why. Why didn't he just eat some of them? And the reason is that the pods that pigs are eating are something that the human stomach can't digest.
Right.
Yeah.
It's food that only pigs could eat. So if he had eaten them, he would have not only gotten sick, he could have died.
Mhm.
So that's why he didn't eat them. So he knew in taking care of those pigs, which as a Jewish boy, he shouldn't have been anywhere close to those pigs.
Right.
That's another story. But he knew that if he had taken their food, it may have resulted in his death, and that's why he went hungry. So if you've ever wondered, well, why didn't you just have some bees? Like, that's why. But I think Matthew probably brought some nice food. And he had the means and he had the money to bring a pretty nice offering to his
Mhm.
parents.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he's sitting in the alleyway with
Slop.
right
Probably
eating,
not.
eating slop. Does anyone remember the woman that comes to ask Jesus to heal her daughter?
Oh, yeah.
And what does Jesus call her? That was the woman with the issue of blood.
Mhm.
Jesus calls her a dog. And they go, Jesus, you can't call people that. But it was a Samaritan woman, and the Jews referred to them as wild dogs. And Jesus uses the word for pet dog. And she rightly says, well, even pet dogs get the scraps that fall from the master's table. But we have to remember, like, the Samaritans were shunned. They were cast out, they were thrown in the dirt, and the Jews didn't want to have anything to do with them. And that was the reason that they were called a dog. And so Matthew, this boy that's been shunned by his own family, by his own people, is just as hated, just as ostracized as the Samaritans, maybe even more so, is sitting there eating his Sabbath dinner with a dog. What great company. To be perfectly honest, and I think that's a good reminder that Jesus didn't just come for the Jews, Jesus came for everybody. Right? The Jews wanted their Messiah. And Jesus said, I've come for, right? I've come for the Jews. And that's literally what he tells that woman. I've come for the Jews. And she's like, yeah, but we can get a little something for us too, right? And then we find out it's not just that. I'm here for everybody. So in terms of Old Testament context on page 46, it says when God rescued the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, he guided them into the wilderness under the leadership of Moses. But the miracles versus plagues that convinced Pharaoh to eventually release the Jews made it clear that God was the one in charge. Oh man. If ever we need reminding of that, we can go back and look at the sermon series going through those plagues, right? Because each one of those plagues is designed to demonstrate to the Egyptians that their gods are not in control. So Pharaoh soon changed his mind after releasing them and chased them to the edge of the Red Sea, where God opened the waters, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. And when Pharaoh and his army pursued, God released the waters, crushing the entire Egyptian army and ensuring Israel's future freedom. So with the wilderness on the other side, God told the Israelites that they would be led to a promised land flowing with milk and honey, but they didn't know the way or how far a walk it was. Instead, all they saw were the impossible things in front of them, across the distance. No shade, no food supply, little water. And then there were the impossible things on the other side of the wilderness, land already conquered and inhabited, which meant more kings, more armies, and impossible things like giants. Standing at the edge of the wilderness, they couldn't have known that God himself would guide their steps. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from the people. You notice where those pillars are placed? Where's the pillar of fire go?
Behind them
Why?
to protect them
How so?
from their enemies.
They can't get any closer, right? No one's going to try and go through that pillar of fire. Also, what happens when you look into a bright light when it's dark?
Can't see.
Can you see what's behind it? Can you see anything? So when the Israelites turned around and looked behind them, what could they see? Just God. Their enemies were there and they couldn't see. Where did the pillar of smoke go? Why did that go in front?
So they have to transfer over the river.
What can they see now? You think? What happens when you turn around? What do you see behind you?
Whatever's there.
The enemy, right? The enemy is behind you. You can see him now. What can you see in front of you?
God.
But that's it. Remember how we talked about God only gives us enough for us to keep going? This is another example of that. They can't see the whole way forward during the day. And at night, they can only see just enough for them to keep going. So this is a trust exercise, right? At night, they can get far enough ahead, but their enemies can't catch up in the day. But they can't see the whole picture at any time. And very rarely does God ever give us a whole picture either, right? We just need to keep going forward, hoping that God will reveal what we need to see at the right time. So standing at the edge of the wilderness, they couldn't have known that God himself would guide their steps. Couldn't they? Can we? When we can't see the way forward? How do we know that God will guide our steps? How can we know that?
We would just know that in our heart. By faith. With faith.
Has God guided your steps before?
Yep.
Will we stop now?
No.
I think that's a good way for the Israelites to have known, right? He brought them through the wilderness, no food, no water, and provided for them the whole way. if God has done it up till now, why would he stop? Right? And it's the same for us. I think it's easy to look back and see all the places where God has had his hand on your life. And even if the trials right now seem right impossible, incomprehensible, you can't see the way forward, knowing that God has been there up until now, he's not going to abandon you here either. And so the way forward is with God, right? Not without him. But that's always a choice that we have to make. And so the Lord went before them, pillar of cloud at day, fire at night. And they did not depart from before the people. And they couldn't have known that God would provide the bread, their manna, a double portion on the sixth day. Who gets the double portion?
They eat it on the seventh day, on their day of rest.
Sorry, when a family has children, who gets the double portion? Who gets the double portion when God gives the bread? All the people, right? Was it just Jews that left Egypt? No, who else came?
Foreigners. That was the one down.
Yep. Some of they had some other slaves that were with them, and some of the Egyptians left too. And so it doesn't say that the manna was just for the Israelites and everybody else went hungry. Right? The double portion was for everyone. So we shouldn't be surprised that Jesus came for everybody, because Jesus is our double portion. Sorry, that was a side note. Too many side notes. Next up, double portion. See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. They couldn't have known that God would keep their sandals and clothing from ever wearing out, or that he would deliver kings and kingdoms into their hands without requiring them to lift a sword. They couldn't have known what they quickly came to know, that God's provision, including rest, is an overflow of his presence. So we spent a lot of time on Isaiah 43:1 last week about being chosen. What promise did God make to his chosen people in Isaiah 43:2, which was at the beginning of page, 42? When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. What is the promise that God makes to his children?
I will be with you.
I really liked what Stephen said, I think it was last week, when he said, I would like to say, no more will you have to pass through the waters. That's a promise too, that we're going to face hardship. And if we're not facing hardship, we're probably doing something wrong. We're probably not walking in God's will, because we are going to face persecution in following what he has laid out for our lives. That promise is made quite clear in Isaiah. Well, that was 2. How does the wording of this verse relate to Exodus 14, Joshua 3, and Daniel 3? Anyone want to look up, was Exodus 14 what we just read? Oh, that was 20. Anyone want to look up Exodus 14?
I've got it.
Okay, go for it.
And the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, and the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord had displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him, and in Moses his servant.
Joshua 3.
And it came to pass when the people removed from their tents to pass over the Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as they who bore the ark will come unto the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, the Jordan overfloweth, all its banks, at all the time of harvest. But the waters which came down from above stood and rose up in one heap very far from the city Adam, that is beside Zarethan, and those that came down toward the sea of the Arabah, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people passed over the right against Jericho.
So this is the first time that they enter the promised land. They have to ford the Jordan River at flood stage. So we always think about the Egyptians going through like the Red Sea and the huge wall of water, but it happened again for them to enter the land that was promised.
Did you want to read verse 17 or not?
No. And then Daniel 3, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And he summoned the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, and all his cronies, and the provincial officials to come and dedicate the image he had set up. So they all came. And King Nebuchadnezzar stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, all peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, the zither, lyre, all the music, you must fall down and worship the image." And who didn't? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they got thrown in the
Fire.
Did it get them?
No.
No, didn't even smell like smoke. What it says, so when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. That's the Red Sea and the Jordan River. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. A little bit more context to that verse in Isaiah in terms of what he's referencing. Those are miracles. The one who made the wilderness was the one leading the Israelites through it. So how does meditating on God as the creator change the way you look at impossible things?
Well, one thing I think that it points out too is that the protection that God gives us. I mean, look at how he protected the Israelites. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, how he protected them. For myself, you have to remember that protection, like an umbrella over you that God gives you too.
In terms of the wilderness, knowing that God created and knows that area intimately, I think gives me a different viewpoint in terms of their wandering. Or you look at this walk. It's a pretty short walk from Egypt to that area of plenty, and instead it takes them 40 years of going round and round and round and round. God could have taken them straight there. The fact that I end up going round and round and round and round and round should give me a pretty good indication that God is trying to teach me something along the way. And perhaps if I would learn my lesson, I could stop going round and round and round and round and round and round and round. God doesn't do things superfluously. He's got a reason and a good plan for it. Additionally, when you look at something that's been made, whether that be woodworking or pottery or things like that, when when those things get broken, if you're not a craftsman, you can't really put it back together. Right? You need to bring it back to its place of origin for it to be made new. In the example of pottery, one of the things that they like to do when pottery was broken was remake it, but inlay it with gold. And so the broken vessel actually ended up being more valuable than the original. Similarly, if you break something that's of some value in terms of its woodworking, when you have somebody, specifically the original maker, repair it, the fact that it has a different grain of wood in the new part of whatever's been fixed makes that now a one-of-a-kind piece. And so the fact that we can end up going round and round and round and round and feel broken, because God made us and God can put us back together, we become more valuable being put back together by God than perhaps what we were, not in terms of like God's love for us, but how we then associate with the world. We become of greater value if we allow God to work in our lives and are willing to share that experience. So God is a craftsman, God is a creator. There's just additional knowledge that I think makes life that much more special if we allow him to do his work. Other thoughts is God the maker. I think the next part starts talking about the characters individually, right?
Mhm.
Wellspring of rest. So for Mary Magdalene experienced Jesus' rescuing power in her life. No kidding. But being freed from her demons didn't automatically remove her difficult circumstances. No doubt she still had painful memories, relationships that were strained or broken, and consequences that came from life gone awry. But also, she had Jesus. No wonder she ended up being one of his devoted followers, exchanging the roof over her head for a tent and familiarity for a whole new kind of wilderness wandering. She had found the kind of rest that only comes from communing with the Creator, and she wasn't about to lose his presence. Things that you noticed about Mary in this episode, things that you liked, things that you questioned.
I loved her attitude towards life. I really noticed, not like she was typically skipping, there was this transformation of light
Yeah.
oozing out of her, and you just saw it in her interaction with other women. You just saw it in just how she did things. And definitely that whole, how we are one way, like what your shirt says, but then something happened and what happened in between with him. And that line is just, it gets me every time, because that's us, that's me. And almost on a daily basis, like, I am the way I am and who I am because of him. I wouldn't be the way I am or who I am or be able to do the things I do if I didn't have Christ in my life.
In all of episode 1, we never see her smile,
Mhm.
not once. And this episode opens up with her in a beauty parlor
Mhm.
smiling,
Mhm.
which is a completely different side to her. And then she meets Nicodemus,
Mhm.
and he calls her what? Lilith.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, for the first time in the episode, you see that smile vanish.
Mhm.
She has not forgotten her past, which I think is incredibly painful. I would like to say, once you're made new, once you're redeemed, you never have to worry about that. But it would be silly to forget. Right? It doesn't inform our decisions going forward if we forget what we once were,
And Satan doesn't want us to do that either.
which is probably a good thing. I think if we forgot, we might take for granted,
Or might do it
Oh,
again.
yeah.
right? Everything that Jesus has done for us. But I think watching her inner turmoil, having that discussion with Nicodemus, I just feel awful for her. And thankfully, he's not like above being sensitive, right? He says, oh, no, I don't want you to relive it. Like,
Right.
I get it. Just tell me
Yeah.
how this has happened.
Mhm.
Okay, then I'll skip
Was he
to,
doubting his powers?
I think he was.
Yeah.
I think he knew better.
I did this? No, I didn't.
Tell me how this is happening, but we'll get to Nicodemus in a minute. So when Mary is trying to do her first Sabbath dinner in maybe forever, I think she said this is my first time.
Mhm.
And Jesus shows up and she says, no, you need to do this. You're the teacher, you're the rabbi. Why doesn't Jesus take over?
Because the Sabbath and that particular part of it is a form of worship. And he wanted to enjoy it, thus, I think.
It can be considered work.
And he wanted to allow her the opportunity to do it.
I like that.
Mhm. And it was her house, and he allowed her to do it in her house because, and he was essentially a guest.
Mhm.
Even though he was who he was a guest
And I
in
think,
her house.
I think that's perfect. When we accept Jesus and we are redeemed, we invite Jesus to be a guest in, right? And we accept the Holy Spirit as a guest
Mhm.
inside us. Hopefully a permanent guest, right? That's the idea. But does that mean that we're not called to do anything anymore?
No.
No. She was called to minister to others,
Mhm.
and she was able to do that to Barnaby and to Shula and to whoever else came to meet her. And so this is Jesus' first lesson in this isn't a passive relationship. This is an active one.
Mhm.
So yes, I think absolutely Jesus came and said, no, this is a day of worship. Go ahead.
Mhm.
And over again, even in the Old Testament, we see people interacting with angels and trying to worship them and them saying no,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
No, worship is for the Lord. And every once in a while it says that the angel of the Lord came and people worshiped him. And that was okay. Because the angel of the Lord is the leader of his armies. And who is the leader of God's armies? Jesus. All through the Old Testament, Jesus has been redeeming people.
Mhm.
And when he redeems them, it is appropriate to worship. And so Mary gets that opportunity, but Jesus also teaches her you need to take an active role in that.
Mhm.
But I also thought he was also saying, you've got this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can do
yeah.
it.
absolutely.
Go for it.
Yes,
True.
100%.
You have I have faith that you can do that. Go for it.
Yeah, the encouragement is sometimes very
Encouragement,
necessary.
absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I love
Other thoughts on Mary before we move to Nicodemus?
I don't know if this was mentioned when I stepped out for a moment, but everyone she invited was some kind of handicap or would be considered, maybe not the,
The lowest.
The
of the
top.
low,
yeah, they
but
were,
like
I mean, the
that,
blind
yeah.
lady,
The two disciples.
the two disciples, one of them is slightly
They were
lame, and
opportunistic.
so to me, it was like her heart is so
Barnaby's-
open to.
Barnaby's handicap is that he's rude.
Yes, yes.
But then, I mean, Shula did make the joke that like it's probably the Pharisees here to shut us down because we invited you.
Yeah.
So I love their dialogue.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. Thankfully, they're not done. So they'll show up again. Nicodemus had built a decent life for himself, but while good behavior, success, and money have the power to make life easier, they don't satisfy the soul. Neither does a works-based religion. So adherence to the Sabbath as God commanded, was a good thing, but only if it resulted in gratefulness and worship of the Creator. While Nicodemus's Shabbat gatherings would have been the most ritually respectful, no doubt there was significant emphasis placed on proper observance of the Old Testament law. Rituals have the potential to distract from proper observance of God's presence. Thoughts on Nicodemus from this episode?
He's one of my favorite characters.
I agree.
I've learned so much just through watching this about Nicodemus. I could go on, but then it's spoiler alert for the next. I better keep my mouth shut.
I think he's unsettled.
Yeah, I think he plays it very well too.
Yeah,
He does.
He does.
there's something.
I love that episode 1 conversation he has with his wife, looking in the mirror. Right?
Mhm.
What do you see? I can't see anything. It's a cheap glass. And he's like, what if our view of God is equally as muddled?
There's definitely something pricking him, right? Like, I know, my knowledge is up here, but I'm missing something. He senses that and you can see that. And he wants to know. He's hungry for it.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize how hungry he is. That's for episode 7. That's my favorite episode, but yeah.
Today.
What?
Today.
Well, they're all my favorite. Everything's my favorite. But if I was gonna pick my ultimate favorite, it would be episode 7.
Anyone find it interesting, like the fear that he showed when he was summoned?
Yeah.
And how in the world somebody has more power than a big shot like Nicodemus to summon him like that?
Right.
Because it's very human of him.
So in Numbers chapter 11, verse 16, it says, the Lord said to Moses, bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take of the spirit that is on you and put the spirit on them. They will help you carry the burden of the people so that you will not have to carry it alone. This is where God establishes the Sanhedrin. So the 71 members of the council starts there. So bring 70 elders plus Moses, so 71. Well, when Moses dies, they have to replace that seat, right? Moses had like the permanent high priestly seat. Well, that priestly seat is called the Nasi. And so that is the absolute head honcho of the Sanhedrin, the ruling council and court of the Israelites. What might get lost if you're not watching with like the subtitles is that it says the Av Biet Din has requested you. Now that's not the Nasi because the Nasi is the high priest, but the Av Biet Din is the right hand man to the Nasi. Number 2 on all of the Sanhedrin. So we know that Nicodemus is a member of the Sanhedrin and is the teacher of teachers. So he is a fantastic teacher. He is highly regarded, but he is then one of the 69 that are left. And those 69 are then lined up and sits in order of like age and stature. So the wisest would then get the number 3 seat, and then 4, 5, 6, 7. And so there was great turmoil and great discussion about who got seat number 3, and who got seat number 4, and who got seat number 5. And this is why Jesus says, don't sit at the head of the table. Because if somebody else comes in who is more deserving, you will have to get up and go to the end of the line. Instead, sit at the back of the line, and when somebody sees where you're sitting, they'll say, no, you stand up and come to this place of honor. Jesus was specifically speaking to the Sanhedrin and their practice of arguing over who deserves seat number 3, who deserves seat number 4, because in that dinner, it was filled with the Sanhedrin and the teachers of the law who were all clamoring on who is going to sit not on the right hand of Jesus, but the left in seat number 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so gentleman number 2 calls and says, Nicodemus, I need to see you. I need to see you now. So the member of the highest court in the land has summoned you. What did I do wrong? But why is he thinking, what did I do wrong? What has he been harboring in his heart?
Doubts over religious beliefs.
And what did his wife tell him in the previous episode? Never utter that
Yeah.
out loud. So the things that he's questioning might be blasphemy. And oh no, this has gotten out. So he shows up. What are the charges? And the guy looks at him and goes, a miracle.
Yeah.
Oh. Finds out that Mary is cured and goes, that's not me. Maybe it's me. No, it can't be. And so that's what leads to that interaction with him and Mary in the marketplace. But when they say a miracle and they point out that he himself said only God, right? Only by God's power could those demons have been taken away. What does he start to harbor in his heart, in his mind? I'm not sure it's doubt. I wonder if it's pride. What if this was me? What does that make me? And so for her to say, oh, it was nothing you did. And you see him go, nothing, his dream of being the Messiah was crushed in that sentence. Because that was each and every one of their dreams. That they would do enough, that they would be enough to become the chosen one of God. They didn't believe that God had a son, right? There is no son but Israel. Oh, that comes later when he's talking to crazy John, creepy John, right? Their interpretation of the Son of God was the nation of Israel. So they were looking for a regular, everyday man who knew the law to come in and bring them to a new place and a new standing. And each and every one of the Pharisees hoped that that would be that. And so I think just a little part of him, they depict it as, maybe it's me. And Mary completely squashes it. But he does an excellent job of then deciding, I would like to know who. I need to know who. So yeah, his growth isn't done, but for the comfort in life that he has, it would be easy for him to sit down and just be happy. And the fact that he continues to search should tell us that there are others who continue to search all across the world, and it's our job to lead them to the right person, just as Mary will end up doing for him. Thoughts on Nicodemus? Other thoughts? I'm talking too much. Oh, our favorite character, Matthew. Matthew had found a way to benefit from the Roman occupation, and as a result, he likely wasn't invited to many Shabbat dinners. Relational fallout would have been unavoidable, though perhaps for a time he was able to ignore the loneliness that came with the taxman territory. But striving after personal gain leads us away from our Creator, away from any hope we have of experiencing true rest and true peace. Thoughts on Matthew?
He had to have known before he went into this profession that he would have been treated this way, right?
Yeah, I don't think his treatment was unique. I mean, he even tries to.
So it's a good paying job.
Oh,
So
yes.
this is why people go into it.
Yeah.
Especially when he grabs and takes my end of the table. and steal from the people.
Does everyone know how that
you're getting
works?
Taxes from.
Everyone understand the Roman tax system?
No.
Okay, so the Romans said, you need to charge X. We need this much money from your province, from your district. And then the tax person would then set whatever they thought they could get on top of that. And anything above and beyond what the Romans asked for, they could keep paying. And so he was extorting everyone on top. And that's why when we see Zacchaeus, right, saying, whatever I have stolen from people, I will pay back tenfold, which was a far larger percentage than what he was obligated to pay back. We see how much he was actually extorting, right? If a tax person had come in and said, this is what the Romans are charging, and that's all I'm gonna ask of you, I don't think they would have hated that person quite so much. But because greed is such a innate human flaw, anyone that was put in that position of power just said, well, they're asking 5%, here's 12, and I'm gonna keep 7. No wonder they hated that person.
Oh, yeah. He personally kept it. He didn't give it on to.
He didn't have to give it anywhere else.
Yeah, that would be pretty.
Nope. Anything above what they could collect. Right, and you see some of those people in default, right? So Matthew is still paying whatever Rome asks. If people are defaulting on taxes, then Matthew's not doing a good job of maintaining people's outflow to the tax system, right? He still wants them to pay their taxes so that he doesn't have to pay for the Roman portion. So they have to pay the Roman portion, but anything else on top of that, then they can keep.
I thought he felt that he was smarter than not only the Jewish people for cheating them, but also the Romans. But he just was so lost. And sitting there with that dog, it was just pitiful.
It was sad.
Very
Most of the time, I feel like he just needs a hug. Not that he would like a hug.
A shake first.
right.
Yeah, you see the Roman soldiers bump into him and he's like,
Oh, yeah.
ah,
All the
ah,
time,
okay.
that whole episode.
Yeah.
Artistically, why do you think they chose to make them look like he's autistic?
You know, I don't know.
Dallas says cover that.
He does.
And I haven't seen that. I would like to see
Yeah,
it.
it's in the bonus material, I think in the extras.
Okay,
I'll try to find it.
I was fascinated by that.
He has an explanation,
Okay.
and that's just their creativity into the show.
I think part of it is because Jesus calls all kinds of people.
Yeah.
And so you see people with all sorts of normal maladies, and incredible other detriments as well, but that's exactly the kind of person that Jesus would want next to him, right? And somebody that's completely not just shunned by society because of their actions, but also who's undervalued because of how they were born. Like that. Not that we have no scriptural basis to say that that Matthew was, borderline autistic, but the way that he records details would
I was gonna say,
certainly,
it
right?
does fit with the type of gospel he wrote.
And that's part of the reason that they chose it.
Okay,
It would fit that that personality.
his recording, yes.
Always writing down.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Very
And
detailed.
Jesus would want someone
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Yeah, in season 2, he uses that gift of granting.
He
And
certainly
it's not
did,
that-
Well, just the lack, if he doesn't hear the Romans, like what other people hear him. Because it didn't,
Like Gaius.
yes, like Caius,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm so sorry for this offense.
Right.
And
and
Matthew's like,
but
what
he
are you
was
doing?
very factual, like, no, this is what I know, this is what I've heard. And I feel like he needs to do something about it instead of like, wasn't fearful over it. He was very bold,
Which he and Peter should get along great.
right?
I think that's my favorite part of the episode is when he's asked, like, are you saying I made a bad deal?
Yeah.
And there's Gaius. Gaius is down on the floor, and all
Yeah.
you see from Gaius is the top of his head going,
Yeah.
yes. But we all know those people, right? That don't understand the power structure and the situation where you should just keep your mouth shut. And instead you speak your mind, whether it's the truth or not. Sometimes, sometimes people need to hear the truth. Maybe we need to be more bold like Matthew. Oh, and Simon. Oh, Simon.
Oh, Simon.
He might have been among those most ready for God to intervene in Israel's difficult circumstances. Overwhelmed by financial hardship, he likely struggled with impatience and maybe even his faith. Perhaps he wondered when God would relieve Israel's suffering and restore their freedom. Perhaps he wondered if God still cared about his chosen people at all. Wonderings that would have made Shabbat remembrances painful and confusing. In any case, Mary is again the example we should aspire to follow. She wasn't striving to obey a commandment in order to earn God's favor. She knew she'd already received his gracious and unmerited favor. Instead, she was eager to set aside time to remember her Creator, the one who knew her by name, to enter into his presence and celebrate what he'd done and what he could do, what he would do. Compared to Nicodemus's Shabbat dinner, Mary's was humble and imperfect, but far more glorious. So back to Simon. What did we notice about Simon this episode?
He's always trying to fix everything.
He's trying to be self-reliant.
He has a brother that would follow him into just about anything and doesn't even trust him with that. He has a wife that his wife is fantastic. I love the way that they portray her. But that is just desperate to know what's going on, and he won't confide in her either. And quite honestly, she probably has one of the better replies to the whole situation. Right? When he's saying, I need you to trust me on this, and she goes, you don't have to answer to me.
Yeah.
You have to answer to God. But next time you have to answer to us both. Because I don't have the strength to do this. Whatever this is, I don't have the strength to do it again. Which I struggle to take that attitude. Right? I always want to know. Well, I always want to help. But sometimes you have to let people know that it's not you that they ultimately answer to. It's God. But that we're here, if you're willing. Yeah, some of the choices that he's making are well, they make me uncomfortable. I see a lot of myself in Simon trying to go it alone and quite honestly making things worse than what they would be if you could just humble yourself and ask for help.
But isn't that kind of true of people in general when you get into dire financial situations and you can't see your way out of them? It's so easy just to like, what can I do? What can I do? Instead of trusting God.
I think that's sin in general. Right?
Yeah.
Not to embarrass my 5-year-old, but when we have to sit down and have serious conversations about behavioral choices, a lot of times she buries her head and the first thing she says is, "This is so embarrassing." Which is a very self-aware thing to say because I don't really want to talk about my sin with anyone else either. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Peter is trying to hide what he's done doesn't surprise me because it's embarrassing. And I don't really want the public to know all of my failings and all of my flaws and what's gone wrong. The fact that I'm not providing for my family, the fact that I've now sold out my own people. Like I can completely relate to the fact of digging a deeper hole just because I couldn't say help.
Mhm.
I sin, help. Well, I guess they're all done. I would like to point out one more thing to ponder for the week then. And that is Mary's dinner setup. She left one empty chair.
Mhm.
Who was it for? Elijah, right? She left an empty chair for Elijah. And I mean, they kind of tell her, oh, that's just for Passover. But what was Passover designed to celebrate?
No.
Originally, Passover was in Egypt, right?
Right.
And what did they slaughter?
Yeah.
A lamb. They put the blood on the doorpost, and the angel of death passed over. It's interesting who takes that seat.
Mhm.
Would anyone like to pray? To finish tonight? I'll pray. Dear God, thank you for this time of fellowship that we were able to have a discussion regarding this series that has been made depicting the life of your son. We thank the makers that they have had this vision. They have remained true to your word, and that your word remains living and active and true to this day. We know that not one word has passed away and won't until the return of your son and the end of his glorious reign. We pray for that day to come when you're ready, that we might be prepared and working for your glory in the meantime, that we might go into your creation, proclaiming your son by your Holy Spirit, that others might come to know the freedom, the redemption, and the rest that comes from being your child and knowing your son. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.